G'day everyone and welcome back to Digging Deeper Ag Chats with Al. I'm really excited to kick off 2026 with you. We've just finished our first full calendar year of podcasts and I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who's listened, shared an episode, sent a message or stopped me for a chat. I genuinely appreciate it. This year we're aiming to bring you even more great guests with plenty of practical conversations you can take straight back to your own operation. We'll be featuring more local producers too. People right here in our region who are doing good things, having a crack, who've got great stories worth sharing. I'm also pleased to say that we've got some regular voices returning. Chelsea from Herd Solutions will be joining us on a monthly basis with veterinary updates and timely animal health advice. And Morgs from Elders is back as well, committed to a monthly livestock market update to help us make sense of what's happening and what it might mean on farm. So whether you're listening in the ute, on the tractor or in the yards, welcome back. I'm glad you're here and I hope you enjoy what we've got coming in 2026. Welcome everyone to Digging Deeper. We've got our monthly guest on, Chelsea.
Hi Al, it's great to be back again.
Now, anyone that's been regularly listening or watching would know that last month with you, it was only a couple of weeks ago now, we actually did a remote one with you in your office down in Maffra Way. We said it was because timing issues and stuff, but there was actually something else going on behind the scenes too, wasn't there, Chelsea?
Yeah, there was another. I had another bit of an oopsie, so it's probably the best way to put it.
Yes, you've done a good job of trying to kill yourself over the last 6 months. Tell us about your latest adventures, Chelsea.
Yeah, I feel like we could rename this podcast to Dumb Ways to Die with Chelsea. But
the Darwin Awards with Chelsea.
Yeah. So yeah, a couple of weeks ago, I was doing some cattle work when I was feeling, admittedly, probably a little bit under the weather. I'd had some gastro the day prior. Wasn't feeling 100%, but I had a job that had been rescheduled, and they were really good about the fact that I didn't turn up previously because I had to deal with an emergency prolapse, which ran way longer than I thought it was. So I had to reschedule them, and there was a deadline they had to deal with getting chopper cattle off the property as well. They had a booking that they needed to adhere to, so I pushed on, and on that day I had a couple hundred Preg Tests to do and a very large number of lame cows as well. I think it was 8 or 9 lame cows as well, and
so a pretty physically
demanding
job.
That's a big job. That's a big job on any given day, even when you're sort of feeling well. And the very last cow, so I did all the preg testing, did 8 of the 9 lame cows, and then the very last cow, and by that point I hadn't eaten much either throughout the day, so I was getting a bit tired, and I was trying to place a belly strap underneath the cow to restrain her so that we could examine one of her feet.
She was in the crush,
She was in the crush, yeah. And the client was on the other side of the crush trying to feed the belly strap down the side of the cow to throw it across to me so I could do it up and restrain her. And I guess I just probably wasn't thinking very well. And I had the door to the crush open at my feet. And I remember watching him try and throw this belt across, and I remembered looking over my shoulder thinking, I'll go get a stick or something to help drag it underneath her. And I literally remember thinking to myself, how do I do this without getting hurt? And then found myself sitting up on the ground, and I knew where I was and I knew who I was with and what I was doing, but there was just a 2-second window where I didn't really quite know how I got there.
Well, you're knocked out, were you?
I wouldn't quite say knocked out, but I just, it was a bit of just a period where I can't quite remember how it happened. And then... Yep.
That's the definition of being knocked out.
I guess that was what the doctor said too. But...
So what actually happened there?
So she kicked the door and I fell over.
Right, so she kicked the door into you.
Yeah,
and you fell over.
So she kicked it into my knee, and when I took my clothes off to have a shower later that day, there was not a bad gash, but there was a bit of a mark where you could see it had hit my shin. Yeah. And I just, because I was already a bit crook, I think it just went down like a sack of potatoes. Pad? Yeah, so I hit my head on the concrete. Yeah. So that was why I couldn't remember what happened. Had to go home and go to the doctor, and which was a bit stressful because I didn't want to get my boss or the client in trouble because obviously it becomes a work safe matter. But they were really good about it. They were.
Oh, you didn't hide it from?
No, we reported it. We reported it, and they were great. They were actually because we I think because we were on the forward foot with them, and we explained it, in terms of what happened, and wasn't a freak accident, but it's not like I got kicked by the cow or anything like that. It was just just a case of having that door open when, admittedly I shouldn't have had it open. So I think. How
many times would you have done it before though in the past?
I don't know. Usually I open it right up. So like I said, I think maybe it's because I was getting a bit tired and I wasn't feeling particularly crash hot. I just probably wasn't thinking my best. And I took it quite seriously in the immediate phases because everyone says with concussion and things like that you can have a delayed onset. So took a few days off work because the doctor sort of ordered it as well. And then when we did that session, the doctor had cleared me to go back to work, but was under a light duties type of setup. And then went back to work last week and managed to come back into work feeling good, and day to day I'm feeling absolutely fine. But
no post injury things you've noticed?
Not really, no. In the in that sort of day 3 to 5 period, I was a bit nauseous still. But when you have gastro, it was really hard to really know whether I had a concussion or not because I was still dealing with this gastro bug at the same time.
Yeah.
So
have you been a show jumper? Have you had many head knocks?
Yeah, I have. So I had 2 when I was 18 and when I was 21, and very similar sort of thing. Particularly the second one I had when I was older. I remember approaching the jump, and I remember the horse taking off. This was just training at home, and then I remember the horse just getting stuck in midair, and very similar sort of thing. I guess technically yes, I did get knocked out, but it was only a couple of seconds that are missing. I sat up and I knew what had happened straight away. But that period where, the horse got stuck in midair to me landing, I don't really remember. And, that was very much sort of the case in this instance as well. So,
Chelsea, for clarification, if you don't remember a period of time, doesn't matter how long, that is some loss of consciousness. I've actually had a couple from sporting injuries, and one of them was similar to that. I remember the tackle, and just a split second later I was fine.
Yep.
But the other one, I was playing rugby for the Uni of Ballarat in Adelaide, and I had a good one, and I lost about 45 minutes of memory.
Yeah, wow.
And then when I came to, I actually had no idea. And I used to play AFL football, not rugby. I'm thinking, what am I standing here watching rugby for? I'm not a rugby player sort of thing. But over the course of the next 2 or 3 hours, slowly came back, and the term is retro amnesia apparently.
Yeah.
And so you slowly get bits and pieces of information back, but
yeah.
But weirdly, I had no effects after those events. I was known good that sort of instant, but next day I was fine. The weeks after I was fine. So.
The first time it happened to me when I was 18, it was a similar sort of thing. I didn't really lose consciousness. I just woke up. Well, I got up off the horse. I remember the horse bucking me off. It was my previous World Cup, Grand Prix horse, and back when it was a young horse, it was it could be quite naughty, and it bucked me off in a practice ring, and but I got back on, warmed it back up, and then went out to do my actual course, and I couldn't remember where I was going, and then I went, crap, I don't actually know where I am, or what I did today, but didn't actually lose consciousness in that instance, so and recovered relatively sort of unremarkably as well. So
well, mine was the same. I wasn't out on the ground or anything because I was back up. I actually played the second half of that game, only 10-minute halves or something, not long. But I was making no sense. The boy said I was just yelling out random stuff, and it wasn't like me to be doing that. So, but I don't remember any of it, but I was still functioning okay. So now the reason we bring this up is not only to make light fun of you again, but it's a bigger serious thing. When we're talking about it, it was actually, we could both name 3 or 4 people that have had incidences similar, some quite significant. So we had Barry Newcomen on, and he actually said that he was very lucky to escape a gate from a bull a few months back. And then there's also a couple other people in the community. So I thought we'd better touch on it because it's actually something we sort of get pretty complacent about at times, don't we?
I think so. And I think also because our focus is on the animals a lot of the time, and we think about, the kick zone of the animal and the flight zone of the animal and things like that, that often the gates get sort of treated as an afterthought, and there's probably just as many people that I can think of as well that have been seriously injured by gates, but not necessarily the animal itself. And also the other thing I was thinking when I was driving here as well, with those newer crushers that have got 2 lever arms for the head bale, the number of very serious near misses I've seen where someone's been standing too close to the second one that's not actually being used, and someone's opened it,
smack them in the mouth,
and you can smack someone in the head with that. So when I was being taught at uni how to handle cattle and things like that, it was always like drilled into us that if you're either using the front one or the back one, and whichever one's not being used absolutely must be disengaged to prevent someone from a head injury when you're opening and shutting that chute. But I do go on a lot of farms where it seems like people have welded them to stay engaged because it frustrates a lot of people.
Shut them and they're
because
not operating, or ours is rusted open, so you can't close. When you do get around to the different properties, how many properties, a percentage maybe, would you say are at a safe, workable set of yards and crushers? Are we getting better, or because in the past there's been some pretty ordinary setups, I know, but
it is getting better. It is definitely getting better, and I think those rebates that went through a few years ago to put new crushers on farms have done a lot of good. Still a long way to go though, and I do find it a little bit frustrating still. You do see a lot of people that have taken the opportunity to use that rebate to get the crush, and every time I go out, the crush is still sitting on the driveway. You actually need to install it as well, actually use it. Look, no, things are getting better, but I think there's still a lot of room to improve. I think probably 10 to 20% of the yards we still go to are probably still, I wouldn't say substandard, but they make my job a lot harder, and they make the cow flow a lot less, comfortable for the animals as well.
Which stresses everything else out. What is the key area? Is it always a crush, or is there other?
Certainly for what I do, the crush is an essential part of our day-to-day. We sort of have a policy in the business that I work in that we don't go in the yards to do yard work. It's not really, just from a work safe perspective, it's not really our line of work. So we very much try and avoid going into the actual yards itself, because that's just a policy. And most vet clinics are, particularly around bulls and things like that, high risk animals. Most veterinary clinics will have a similar sort of policy, that the onus is on the, the farmer to work their own animals through their yards. Just because of, particularly bulls, because they're so dangerous. And probably some of the things that still happen in spite of, really good yard setups and things like that I think are a little bit preventable is trying not to jam too many animals in the race as well. I've had a couple of instances where I've just been minding my own business preg testing in the crush, and then a cow behind me has tried to climb in over the top of the slider with me, just because too many animals are being jammed. And it also makes it really hard opening and shutting the slider not to end up with 2 or 3 or 4 in the crush as well. So it just comes back to all those sort of low stress stock handling principles, I guess.
Is there a property that when you see on the job code you think, this is going to be a tough one again? You don't have to name it. I'm shame.
Look, certainly. Throughout my whole career, everywhere I've been, there is those handful that you just sort of go, it's not so much necessarily that it's dangerous. It's just that
it's difficult.
It's just difficult. Like you go home feeling more tired than you should for the amount of work that you've done. Because, you really have to push and yell at the cows to get them to move, because, the yards aren't set up for them to be inviting for the cattle and things like that. And when you're having to really push and shove cattle to get them into the crush, it's really exhausting. It's not so much even that it's not safe. It's just that it makes you work harder than you need to do what needs to be done.
I drenched 200 lambs the other day in cattle yards. felt like I drenched about 4,000 lambs by the end of it because nothing flowed and it was difficult. So
yeah.
It was the longest 2 hours of my life, it felt like. So. Is there anything else you want to mention before we move on to the topic today?
One thing I did think I'd mention, because again, I see it and I think it's probably an accident waiting to happen, is the number of people I see that, particularly with those forcing yards that are coming in as well, on that topic of, I guess, gates that can really hit people, is you see people often, and I was probably guilty of doing it the other day, is putting the gate between you and the animal because you think it's going to actually protect you, when really it's a pretty volatile metal piece of gear that could really seriously harm you. And I see a lot of clients that'll sort of have the gate out in front of them as they're shutting it behind.
Little force field in front of them.
Yeah, and then I know of so many people that cows kick the gate and the gate smacked them in the head, and the exact same things happened to a lesser extent. So I think just being really mindful of that when you're working with them, because like I said, we always think about the danger of the animals and making sure that we can't get ourselves kicked, but it's about, also what's between us and them. So
I was taught from a long time ago, you always have your foot on the gate rather than your hands as well as you're shutting or chaining it up, because if a cow does kick it, then your foot's got a lot more strength behind it than a simple old wrist sort of thing. A lot of wrist apparently get broken in cattle yards.
Yeah, and wrist injuries can be really debilitating too once they happen. Like, you think about how many things you use your hands for. Yeah. It can be a real inconvenience. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're glad you're with us, and we hope that in the next couple of months you stay safe and look after yourself. And it's a good reminder to everyone, actually, especially at the end of a long day. The last couple of animals often the worst time or the most at-risk time.
Yes.
When you're thinking about packing up and going home rather than potential dangers in the yard. So, so stay safe, Chels. That's what I'll say. Now, we're going to talk about a couple of little things today. We're talking about calving, coming into spring calvers.
Yep.
And then you also mentioned on the way in grass tetany, which is also something we should be thinking about now with the current weather. Which one do you want to start with?
Let's start with the nutrition, the pre-calving, I reckon.
Yep, right. What do we need to know about how far away are we really, and when do we need to start thinking about the nutritional side of animals?
Oh, it's about probably 3 months out from calving is when the conceptus or the fetus inside the cow is going to start consuming a lot more energy and having a lot higher energy requirements. So up until the sort of 5 month mark, the requirements of the calf are pretty negligible, and then we get a bit of an exponential growth in size right up until probably a week before calving. In the last sort of 10 days, the calf doesn't tend to grow that much, but
is that generally coincide with when we wean cows as well, or calves?
In terms of
like
when the energy, it can do. I think weaning time is a really good opportunity to sort of look at your cow nutrition and think about, are they in a condition that you're happy with going into calving and you simply need to maintain it, or is there some energy gains that we need to achieve before calving period so we can set that cow up for the following joining period as well. So there's a lot of data out there that correlates, the body condition score at calving.
What's the numbers for us, Charles?
We want them to be calving in a body condition score of 3 to 3.5. If it goes any lower than that, we're going to see potentially, poor fertility in the subsequent breeding period, because the cow's going to be milking off of her back and may not be able to get up to a condition score that we want at joining. So we don't want them too low so that it's impacting the fertility. But we also don't want them obviously too high, because then we're going to run into calving problems as well, with too much fat being put down in the pelvic canal. So, we want them in that happy medium of sort of a 3 to 3.5.
Now, just with different breeds, I don't think I've ever seen a 3.5 condition score Jersey or Friesian. Do we rate them differently, or is that just...
It depends on, we do sort of have pretty similar condition score targets, and actually there does seem to be, particularly with dairy cows, because there's often a lot of good quality feed available, it actually can be harder than you think to keep the weight off them coming up to calving, with ryegrasses often being as energy dense as they are. So often, the condition score is one part of it, but some people do a 8-point condition score system versus a 5, depending on who you talk to. And within Australia, you'll find people referring to both. Right. I think off memory, the 8-point system, which I personally don't really use, it's come out of the States.
As in 8?
On a scale of 8, it's
fat.
like very fat.
Right.
So they'll use an 8-point condition scoring system, unlike our 5-point system here. So another big thing we see with dairy, which is a sort of an emerging industry within itself, is the lead feeding, which has really sort of revolutionised metabolic incidence of disease with those dairy cows at the point of calving. So
what's lead feeding, sorry?
So that's where in the last sort of month of the dry period, those cows will become slowly acclimatised to a grain diet again before calving again. It's not a huge amount of grain, but it's just enough so that the rumen gets a bit of exposure to grains, so that when they're, once they calve and the energy system, cranks right up and they need a huge amount more energy, it's not like they've had no grain for that whole dry period and then they're exposed to grain
so
after they've calved. Is
this looking more at the rumen development for that animal coming into graining, or is it also some supplements they put in there for calving?
Yeah, it's both. So there's the grain component, but there's also a supplement component that basically what it does is we feed them an anionic salt, and the idea is that it puts the cow in a very, very slightly acidotic state, and that will actually, it sounds counterintuitive, but it actually, it slightly deprives the cow of calcium right up to the point of calving, because what happens is it makes the hormonal system a lot more efficient at extracting calcium from the diet and also from the cow's bones once they calve, because that's when that calcium requirement shoots up quite dramatically.
So I'm assuming with that method you get in better efficiency of the grain once they go in the shed, but you also less preg toxin, things like that? Yeah,
so we see a lot less metabolic problems now than we used to on dairy farms because of these lead feeding diets that have come in, which is really, really great. Occasionally our role is to troubleshoot when they stop working. So I had an interesting case last year, and part of managing that diet is the concept of the dietary cation anion difference, or a DCAD, which a lot of people have probably heard of. And so you need to manage the difference between the positive charge in the diet and the negative charge. And if you get too many positive like cations in that feed, it can offset the success of that lead feed, is probably the best way to put it. And just one example is, I had a client that was having lots of milk fever problems despite putting in a proper lead feed diet, and the cows were still eating grass. So some people will go to a really extreme measure where they'll actually take the animals off grass and feed them a hay or something like that, because grass can be really high in winter in potassium. So this particular property that actually historically had they lit some trees on fire to get rid of the trees that they'd cleared, and that had rapidly increased the potassium level in the soil, which was taken up by the plants, and then it completely unravelled all of the DCAD in the diet. So yeah, little things like that can really upset things. And yes, we did some feed tests and things like that to sort of get to the bottom of what was going on. So.
And the more you learn, the more you don't know, isn't it?
Dunning-Kruger effect, isn't it? So.
Yeah. Okay, so back to leading into that dry cow period, condition score 3.5. Any supplements? You mentioned a couple there with the dairy industry, but in a beef, say, enterprise, are we putting out anything before, like too far beforehand, or are we getting closer to calving and we're going to be putting out some supplements for them? Or
I think that depends entirely on how much feed's on the ground, and doing some body condition scoring at weaning, like we sort of said before, determining, is there some cows that need to be putting weight on coming up to calving because perhaps they were in too low a body condition score at weaning, versus whether there's adequate pasture on the ground, and perhaps we actually want to restrict their feed intake so that they don't get too fat coming up to it as well. So if we don't have an adequate body condition score, then obviously we're going to need to supplement with some sort of hay or silage or something like that. In most instances, I find, unless the cows are extremely skinny, a good quality hay or silage is enough in instances where, feed availability on the ground isn't there is fine. When it comes to silage, I think it's really good to get a feed test done because we know, the energy and particularly the water content of silages can vary quite a fair bit. So even if the quality's there, getting the volume fed out is a little bit more tricky with silage just because that unknown water content can make calculations difficult if you don't know what the values are that you're dealing with. So we'd always advise people to get a feed test done when looking at putting a feed ration together. It's just going to take all the guesswork out of what you're doing.
Yeah. Question on silage then. If we get a feed test where we buy the silage in or make the silage, does it change over time as long as it's been wrapped?
Oh, that's probably a better question for people that make it. But my understanding is that there will be a decline and then after a while it does stabilise. But I think that very much depends on whether it's been wrapped or whether it's been covered. And I'm certainly not an expert in that space. But my understanding is that it does stabilise after a while.
Or you can take that one on notice and find out and get back to us next month.
I can do that.
What else do we need to know about leading into calving, Chels?
I think also leading into that grass tetany, if you're in one of those sort of high-risk areas, we can see instances where a magnesium supplementation in winter can be quite beneficial, particularly because, heavily pregnant cows are going to have a slightly higher magnesium requirement, so they're slightly higher risk for grass tetany than, an animal that's got no, like something like a steer or a heifer that's got no added, feed requirements over and above maintenance. Yep. So particularly in sort of high country regions and places where frosts can get really consistent through winter, we can certainly see grass tetany through winter where we do get the odd warm day in between. So coming back to when we were talking about that sort of concept of DCAD before and the problem with excessive potassium, we can also see excess potassium on those warm days after we've had extended periods of cold. So what happens is if we have extended cold periods over a sort of 7-day period and then we have a warm day, the potassium will sort of accumulate in the roots of the plant on those cold days, and then when we get a day of warmth, all of a sudden those roots will uptake all that potassium into the plant itself, so we can get this rapidly really toxic feed full of potassium. And what happens in the rumen is that it strongly inhibits the absorption of magnesium. And unfortunately for the cow, there's no magnesium storage inside the animal. It's not like things like calcium where we can store it in bones and things like that. The cow requires magnesium every single day to do its proper nerve function and things like that. So yeah, magnesium is really important for nerve firing and normal nerve firing. So when we have a really low magnesium state, we can very rapidly see seizures and loss of consciousness as a result. So
ryegrass staggers and grass tetany, is that the same thing?
No. So we can
similar symptoms then? Very
similar symptoms though, and unfortunately though, with magnesium deficiencies, you have to get it really early, otherwise it is very rapidly fatal. And the challenge with treating them when they're really early is that they're also very angry. So it's really difficult to treat animals in the early stages of grass tetany. So whereas with the ryegrass staggers, they usually die because they, get their head stuck in a gate or a fence or something. Like it's a misadventure type related death. So, the grass tetany we can see in all sort of classes of animals, and not just on ryegrass. We can see it on other pasture species as well.
So back to the grass tetany. I'm assuming if you notice it in an animal, all of them are going to be suffering to some degree?
Yeah, some more than others. Often I find once you see one, you go and look at the rest of them and they might not be clinically affected, but you can tell that they, they're a bit more aggro than they would usually be.
So is that simply a magnesium additive? Is that the treatment?
You can, yeah. So I have tried to treat them in the clinical phases, and I think nearly every time the animal still died. It's just the problem with magnesium is that the magnesium is required in what's called the cerebrospinal fluid. So that's like the water bath that coats the brain and the spinal cord. So unlike things like a milk fever, where you can give a flow pack IV. And you're rapidly replacing the blood calcium because that's where the deficiency is. With the magnesium, it needs to make its way all the way back to the cerebrospinal fluid. So it's not just a case of putting it back in the bloodstream. Mm-hmm. So that's why the response to treatment is a lot less.
Is that just because of physical time, or is it?
Yeah, so it's just got to make its way back around into that cerebrospinal fluid. It's just not instant like it is with calcium. Right. So, yeah, we do find that, prevention's better than a cure in those cases. And so there's a lot of different, mixes out there, but they're very cheap, basic ingredients. So you can get salt, molasses, and magnesium drums that you can just mix it up in a bin, and they'll come up and
it's like a loose lick type.
Like a loose lick, yeah, exactly. There are also mixes out there that have got limestone in them as well. I generally say you probably don't want to put limestone in before calving though, because of that concept we were saying before with the DCAD, particularly with cattle, is if you feed too much calcium in the lead up to calving, you can end up with you can end up with milk fever problems also, because those tissues aren't sensitive to the hormonal system that's required to extract calcium out of the feed. So limestone's okay, but generally after calving is when it's preferred.
Yeah, so let's just go back to the start of grass tetany. If we've got a fair few overcast, cooler days, but then we come into a warmer spell, that's when the risk is...
Yeah, so it's not the actual cold period itself, it's when you get that warm couple of days.
So if we're looking at the forecast and it's been like mid-18s or whatever, we're coming into a couple of 24-degree days, we've got moisture in the ground, things are going to grow. We should be getting ththose licks out before that warm weather comes. Yeah,
correct. So you want them... happily accepting it at that point. So, certainly want it out a few days prior so that they're used to seeing it, but so that they're not seeing it for the first time the day that you need it. Other things you can do are, putting lower risk stock on those paddocks, or even just grazing them for shorter periods of time and putting them on hay in a dry lot or something like that, if that's a possibility. Just to minimise or dilute the effect of that. Really potassium-rich feed as well. So sometimes even just supplementary feeding during those periods, just to reduce the pasture intake, can help as well. And also, potentially putting stock in that aren't pregnant, because they're just going to be a little bit less at risk. Certainly not no risk, but not quite as catastrophic as a pregnant animal as well. So.
Yeah. Now, we had Grant Sims on a few weeks ago. Could you put any sort of foliar out, or is this about above your sort of... My thought
would be no, because it's more to do with the plant's responses to weather. It's not so much about what's in the soil. It's about the plant's response to that weather period. So my initial thought would be no. What I would say, and what's well documented, is also avoiding putting cattle in areas where potash has gone out in the recent times, in recent months as well. So certainly if I ever go and see, cattle that have been affected by grass tetany, that's one of the first things we ask is, has potash been applied recently? And when I was a student, because you're not really educated in soil science or anything like that, I remember me and my friends being like, "Oh, well, you just don't use potash then. That's just how, and then you come out and you get into the real world and you go, oh, that's just stupid, you can't do that." But
so some places are naturally high in potash.
Some of them,
and so they at higher risk.
Can be, yeah. So I know some dairy farmers talk about like night paddocks can tend to accumulate more potash and things like that as well, whether that's because, a lot more supplementary feeds put out in those paddocks, and also, more contamination from the animals themselves. And I know some producers that they know which paddocks they don't want to put their dairy cows on right before calving, because they know they're higher risk than others. So
there you go, there's a lot involved in it. What else do we need to know about this, Charles, or have we covered most things?
I think probably just be careful if you think you've got an animal that's got grass tetany. They can be very, very dangerous to be around on the topic of safety. And they can be really difficult to treat. Number of times I went and turned up to them as a student or a recent grad, and they've gone through fences and things like that. So
Are they physically quite able, just aggressive, and then they go downhill, or they get weak quickly as well?
No, they're usually not very well coordinated with what they're doing. So there's a lot of staggering around and
but
things
they're not
like
lethargic or anything.
No,
like that.
quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. So
it does make it difficult, I guess. So
yes.
Okay, well, now that we've finished most of that on grass tetany, you also wanted to talk a little bit about preg testing, because a lot of people have preg tested now, but sometimes in a tight season, the thought of culling cows and preg testing for late calvers, some people have said to you, oh, you can't do it late calving, is that right? Or
Yeah, well, I just get often people sort of ask me, oh, what's the latest you can preg test to? And really, we can preg test them right up until the point that they calve. You've got to be very gentle with your handling as they approach calving, but the scan will pick up a pregnancy right up until the point that they calve. So it's never too late to book your preg testing in if you want to offload some cattle before winter. There's no too late a period to do it. So certainly, because I know things are getting a bit dry and people are getting a bit stressed, and the forecast is not looking great. So certainly, if you've got the ability to offload some empty cows, I think there's still the opportunity there to do so, and we're still flat out at the moment doing a lot of preg testing. So there's still that time there to do it.
So something jumped in mind. Do not everyone preg test then in the cattle industry?
I'm sure there's people that don't, and I'm very much aware of there's people that don't. So
yeah, right.
Yeah.
So tell us in a couple of minutes the benefits of preg testing, because for me we preg test cattle and sheep.
Yep.
Not a whole lot of uptake in the sheep industry.
Yeah.
With preg testing, and it is an expense, but I think it pays for itself tenfold just about.
Yeah.
Tell us why we should be preg testing cattle, and maybe even touch on sheep if you feel.
Yeah. Well, I think both for cattle and sheep, that flexibility to be able to turn off animals that are not going to calve or lamb in the subsequent season. The longer they're on your property and they're not, raising an animal or pregnant, they're essentially just a maintenance cost to your pasture base. So anytime you've got any sort of maintenance cost in that pasture base, it's not going to be optimising your profitability whatsoever. So obviously there's that huge benefit of doing so. Certainly for the sheep, I'm not a big sheep person, as you're aware, Al, but all the people that I know that have got sheep, that have got their sheep pregs tested, said it's just something they couldn't fathom not doing now, just to be able to, manage your twins and singles separately.
Yeah, I was going to say that's probably the biggest advantage, apart from identifying your empties. They can get rid of them earlier or take them off and actually put weight on them and sell them as at the minute they're worth a lot in some condition. But the ability to manage your twins and singles, late pregnancy and early lambing, I don't think you could argue against it, because the amount of feed that most single bearing sheep need is very, very low compared to a twin, and if you can get extra lamb, especially in current commodity markets, an extra lamb to survive, and then also saving certain paddocks for closer to weaning as well, because you can manage grass, it's definitely a very good tool to be using. So
yeah, and I think for the cattle, again, going back to decisions that you couldn't not have done now. I do a lot of pregnancy testing with aging for clients now, and the number of clients have said, the ability to know that they're going to calve in the first 3 weeks versus the second versus the third, in terms of knowing which animals to look for, even drafting things on early versus late gestation, so that you can manage your feed base a lot better. It is, the number of people I've had tell me that now that they've got that information, they wouldn't not be able to manage their calving without it, was quite interesting as well.
Yeah, gives another lever as well to pull for those producers to be able to sell those late calvers off, instead of calving over however long. They can shorten up that calving by a couple of weeks just by getting rid of a few tail enders. And exactly.
And we've missed that boat for being able to age things accurately at the moment, but that's where we get really busy with preg testing in January, February. For that reason, is we'll do them 6 weeks after the bulls come out.
So 6 weeks is the time for aging?
Yeah, I mean, technically, if we absolutely had to scrape the bottom of the barrel, I can do them from 28 days.
Don't say that.
But it's not easy. And the other thing is, if we're doing them in that...
Oh, that's early. You can go earlier.
Well, I can go down to 28 days.
Yeah, right.
But I always sort of say to people, like, if you see something in that 1 month to 6 week bracket, really I'd prefer to recheck them as well, because it's just so early that a lot of that's where you can still get embryonic loss, whereas 6 weeks plus, there is still going to be some embryonic loss, but it's not to the same extent.
Yeah.
So just double checking that they've held. So for most beef producers, 6 weeks is very, very achievable, and we can still be very, very accurate.
Yeah.
At that point, I mean, we do have some dairy clients though that I do a lot of 26 to 28 day scanning as part of management, because they want to know exactly. So we do that preg test during joining, so that they know who's taking to AI and who's not, and who's got a phantom pregnancy where they've stopped cycling after being AI'd, but it's not because they're pregnant; it's just because they stopped cycling, all those sorts of things. So we do have a couple of clients that
Will
take
they
up
multiple preg tests as well then, though?
Yeah, so exactly right. We'll do an early preg test and then a late preg test as well, just to confirm that they've held. So
yeah, with the sheep, I know our scanner, they have 6 weeks, same as cattle, 6 weeks after the rams come out, over 6 week maximum joining, and she just says after that you can see them, but there's too many legs and too many heads. You can't identify twins and singles very well. She can do wet and dry, no worries, but can't sort of twin them as well. So
yeah, it does get harder. Yeah, the later it goes, but there's still value, I think, in doing it, even if it is a bit later. So.
Now, do you pretty much have the same clients the same sort of week each year?
This is only my 3rd year into this, but I do have some clients that very consistently, I know I'll be doing them the 2nd week of January, that sort of thing. So it does make planning a little bit easier. We're also very fortunate that we've got a couple of agents in the area that are really good at organising preg testing runs for us, which I think is really great. That
when it's further away from
So we've got a couple of agents in Orbost that organise it, and even just around here as well. I'm really grateful to the agents that are around that sort of help work in with us to get these types of jobs done, because it's really nice having extra feet on the ground to do a preg test as well, just to make it a little bit more efficient. I think we're quite lucky around here with some of the agents that put a lot in to make it work. So
what's a big day preg testing for you? How many head can you get through?
I think the most I've ever done is probably the 800 mark. It's probably It's not Enoch's 2000, but
he's mental though.
I know. I don't think I want to get to that level. So
was that on the one property or?
No, usually it's two or three. But and that's pretty comfortable if that's all you've got to do for the day. And really good setups. Like we've got one client here, we can get through 150 an hour through crush, but that's not with me even calling them pregnant. That's just saying stop when it's empty and everything's just being let go, and it's very, very quick.
That would determine a lot of the numbers, wouldn't it? How they flow.
Yes. So it's always a lot quicker when we don't have to vaccinate or drench or anything like that at the same time. Yeah. So
No, that's good. Now you're not going to get let off that easy, Charles, because you also got your quote for the month. So what quote have you got for us this month?
I have got one. I don't know where I heard it from, but one of my favourites is, the standard you walk past is the standard you accept. I think it was actually, it might have been a military quote from somewhere, possibly originally. But that was one of my favourites that stuck with me. So.
I've heard different versions of that, and I like that one too. What standard do you walk past in the garden at home that you accept that your partner's not happy about? Is it maybe he's been quoting it too?
There's probably a couple of plants that need to be put in the bin coffin and let away. They're looking like they probably stopped being alive quite a long time ago. What else? There is definitely more. I'm so lucky that he does most of it for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for the quote and thanks for your time today, Charles. Take care of yourself. We don't want to hear any more interesting stories next month.
No, we've got the 3. Everyone says bad things come in 3s. So,
yeah, that's right.
We've got that squared off, I think. So
yeah, well, let's just hope that's the end of it for a little while. So thanks very much, Charles.
Thanks, Al.
See you next time. A big thank you for tuning in today. And remember, if you have a question about today's episode or a topic you'd like us to cover, reach out to one of our many platforms and join the conversation. We're here because of your passion and commitment to agriculture. Together, we can build a stronger farming future.
This podcast is made possible by the Future Drought Fund Regional Drought Resilience Planning Program, co-funded by the Victorian and Australian governments.